Hello, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the session. We'll just go through a few instructions before getting started. So you'll see that interpretation is available into English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. You must click on the globe icon you see below that says interpretation, and you must select a language. Even if your choice is English, even if you'll be listening to English, you need to select English. And then the other important thing is that we will be using menti.com, and which is an audience interaction tool throughout the event. So either on your phone, tablet, or in a new browser window, you need to log into menti.com and type the code that you will see now, which is 30187124. And you can use also the chat box to participate in the conversation and share questions you might have. And then we will include your questions in the Q&A session at the end of our session today. Okay, so in this session, we'll have 4 speakers, and I'm going to ask them to briefly please introduce themselves. I'm seeing somebody's asking for the code. I don't know if we can show it again. The code for Menti. Great, thank you. Okay, so let's get started. And so I'll ask our speakers to briefly introduce themselves. I'll start first. I'm realizing I haven't introduced myself. My name is Ines Caillava. I'm a social protection specialist at the World Bank. I work in the Social Protection Delivery Systems Global Solutions Group. And now I'll ask Winnie to please introduce herself briefly.
Thank you, Ines. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Winnie Mwasiaji. I work with the State Department for Social Protection in Kenya. I am currently leading the Economic Inclusion Intervention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Winnie. Now we'll go to Carolina.
Good morning, good afternoon to you all. My name is Carolina de Miranda. I'm Director for Social and Livelihoods Promotion in Fundación Capital.
Thank you very much. Avnish, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Avnish Gungadurdoss. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of Instiglio, an organization that works on improving the impact of social programs through results-based financing.
Thank you. And now, Doug.
Hi, everybody. My name is Douglas Emeott. I work with Avnish at Instiglio in Bogota, Colombia. I'm a manager. Nice to engage with you all.
Great. Thank you very much. So as you'll see, we have a very interesting panel of speakers. I'll just, I'll just share my screen just for a brief introduction. Okay. So as you know, this session focuses on leveraging technology and improving service delivery in the COVID-19 context. We see that there has been different approaches in the implementation of social protection programs and economic inclusion programs in particular. We see that there has been a mix of face-to-face interactions and virtual modalities. So we see that, we have some data here that shows that programs have been using technologies for different aspects. So for example, we see that technology has been used mainly for the overall management of the program and monitoring. It has been used to monitor the progress of beneficiaries in their participation in economic inclusion programs. There's also been use of technology for beneficiary enrollment, provision of specific services or components that are part of economic inclusion programs, grievance redress mechanisms, and notifications to participants. So when it comes to specific aspects of economic inclusion programs or specific components of these programs, we see that technology has been used to deliver transfers, so cash transfers, business capital, skills training, coaching, financial services and facilitation, market links, and others. So this is a bit the status pre-COVID, and we also know that pre-COVID, a lot of the economic inclusion activities were delivered as face-to-face interactions between program managers, program staff, and beneficiaries. And we know that due to COVID and social distancing guidelines, there was the need to minimize face-to-face interaction. So a few countries and a few governments and NGOs and programs have been testing new modalities and introducing virtual modalities to facilitate the delivery of economic inclusion programs and specific activities. So we see that then in this context, leveraging technology is critical to deliver programs and improve management and increase efficiency. We see that digital solutions have the potential then to facilitate the delivery of these programs in the context of COVID-19. But we are also seeing that these modalities might be here to stay, in the sense that this testing that is happening during this pandemic might have some learnings and for the future of the implementation of these programs. However, we also see that technologies pose challenges in the sense of building capacity, integrating information systems, and ensuring data protection. There's also another important challenge, which is related to the digital divide, which is present depending on the location, income groups, and age of beneficiaries or participants in general. Okay, so with this introduction, now we'll get into the session, and we'll discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the implementation of social protection programs and economic inclusion programs in particular. And we'll discuss how innovative digital solutions can improve the delivery of these programs. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I believe we have an empty poll now, or otherwise we'll, okay. Thank you. Okay, so here we have a few statements, and you'll have to rate them to rate the level you agree with these statements. So from strongly agree to strongly disagree to strongly agree. The first statement is whether technology or digital solutions can help in service delivery of economic inclusion or social protection programs. So please introduce your rating. The second is digital literacy is still nascent in my country. Okay, we're seeing some answers there. And the third is innovative digital solutions are more often not cost effective. Okay, so we're seeing for this first statement on technology being able to help the delivery of these programs, we see that most people agree with the statement, so 4.7. On the second one, digital literacy is still nascent in my country, we see 3.7, so that shows us different realities depending on the country context. So some countries which have more nascent context and others a bit more advanced context in terms of digital literacy. And then the final one, then we see in terms of whether innovative digital solutions are often not cost effective, we see 2.7. So we see this shows different opinions on this topic. Okay. Thank you. Now we have, yeah, okay, I'm seeing some answers already. So technologies that are most relevant and effective to deliver programs. So here you need to please select 2. The options are digital payments, mobile money, training or coaching, use of text messages and WhatsApp, and standard phone calls. So please make your choices of the 2 that you think are most relevant and effective to deliver programs. Okay, we're seeing more answers coming. Okay, it seems to be clear that technology is mostly used to deliver digital payments, mobile money, which is one of the modalities. We're seeing also use of SMS and WhatsApp to engage with beneficiaries. And we see a few answers also on use of technology for training and coaching. Great, but we see that the majority of the answers are on digital payments, and which were already a trend before the pandemic, but they got even accelerated due to the pandemic. Okay, this is great. So now we can just jump into our discussion and panelists. So I'll pass the word now to Winnie, who will make the first presentation. Over to you, Winnie.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, just put it on presentation mode if you can, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I will present this on behalf of the community of practice. So I'm generally going to present what is happening across Africa on how we are leveraging on technology, and mainly I'll talk on the challenges that came about, especially during the COVID delivery of the economic inclusion activity during the COVID, and then also look at some of the possible solutions that we could use for this. So as I said, I'm presenting on behalf of the Community of Practice for Africa. This presentation was prepared in collaboration of all the members of the Community of Practice for Africa. Community of Practice is actually a knowledge management learning. It's used mainly for learning dialogue between the government and government representative across Africa. It stimulates learning. We share a lot. It was mainly started for the cash transfer, but it has been scaled up to now look at broader social protection, looking at issues of economic inclusion, looking at adaptive social protection, and trying to generally look across social protection programs. Currently, it has 43 member countries. And it's led by a steering committee that is supposed to create some ownership. We have facilitation that is coming from the World Bank and the UNICEF youth representative. This is just the team of the steering committee members. They come from across Africa, Nigeria, Gambia, Uganda, Kenya, Lesotho, and the Ghana. In terms of delivery of social protection during this COVID situation, I think it has really been hard in delivering the implementation of the program. We know most Africa is very remote. Most of the areas are very remote, and therefore very difficult to reach the beneficiaries in terms of even targeting with the various programs that are supposed to be delivered, and even the delivery of the program itself. And many of these programs sometimes were discontinued because of, in some parts of Africa, because of the inability to reach these particular people. It has been very, very difficult. In some places, the authority very supportive in terms of allowing you to reach the place. So, and so some of the opportunity we can use, or the government can use, is trying to scale up this cash transfer program by using the use of technology. The ability of technology to enable you to reach the most of the areas that you want, because sometimes going in phase is sometimes very difficult. So we have to now rethink of more innovative ways to try and deliver even payment or any other packages that they're supposed to be delivered, especially looking at the mechanism to enhance the delivery of economic inclusion programs, such as training and coaching. Those are some of the main components of packages that are given during economic inclusion. Again, sorry, it's not moving, I don't know. Sorry, it has taken a bit long to move. And then if you're looking at the issues of digitalization, sometimes it causes a lot of challenges. Like in Africa, we have a lot of low network or coverage with the network. So you're not able to reach some places even with the network, sometimes causing delays even in terms of letting the beneficiaries know that the funds have, or the packages have been released. It becomes very difficult. And that's why I was saying that it's important that the conversation begins to look at how government can deliver these interventions through digital services. And at this, I think this conversation is already going on in most of the country. Like for instance, Kenya, we are already doing a lot, exploring ways of even giving even other services like training using technology. Currently, most African countries are already using technology for payment and for targeting, using the things like single registry system for targeting. But during the COVID, it was a bit difficult because the target group was completely different. There are people who are thrown out of work because of, they left work because of the situation. So therefore they are home, mostly those in the informal settlements, they lost their jobs. So therefore that means targeting again, and it's very difficult. It was very difficult to target during the COVID the time. So again, there are several challenges because of inclusion, the issue of inclusion, or because of the technology. Not everybody has phones, or even though some of them have, it's very difficult to maintain the chips for delivery of this particular place. I know Senegal are giving phones, one of the few countries in Africa who are giving beneficiaries phone for delivery. For instance, Kenya, what we do is that during the COVID, delivery was being done through the mobile phones, but we were not giving them phones. So therefore the person had to have a phone. And if you don't have a phone, therefore reaching you again became very difficult. So again, the issue of phones or chips or that is very critical in terms of technology. But then how do you make sure that people have access to these phones? Some of the opportunities we can use is the possibility of using phone numbers, because sometimes getting to the people, it was very difficult. Some of them in the informal settlement, you don't even know how to get to them. Some of them in the rural areas, although rural areas are a bit easier because you have chiefs that can guide you to the particular places. So therefore the use of phones can also be taken as an opportunity for us to be able to locate the beneficiaries where they are and be able to deliver this food or any other packages that we have. Also, the use of biometric can also be another option. Whenever you can't use phones and where the people don't have phones, the use of biometric can also be explored to replace where people cannot have phones. So this practice already in many African countries, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, or most of the countries are using the biometric method for delivering of this. Again, the issue of low network across Africa, again, it's very, very, I think I talked about that. The issue of maintaining electronic payments. It's sometimes very difficult to maintain this when you're not able to give these people funds. So therefore, how do we ensure that we try to give them funds so that they are able to reach, to be able to get the services that we want to give for them? Provision of beneficiary with smartphones. In Senegal, I said they're already giving this, but again, even as much as you give this, the penetration of technology and even the knowledge of youth being able to use these phones, smartphones, sometimes becomes very difficult in the use. So some consideration should be made of using even phones for monitoring. If we are people very well, then they are even able to use these funds for monitoring of economic inclusion programs. So technology is very critical in terms of being able to enhance delivery of economic inclusion programs. Again, the literacy level, the issue of the current skill setup that is in Africa, the education level is very low, especially in some of the rural areas. And this is affecting the use of the smartphones. You can have the phone, even if you give it to them like Senegal is giving, but how many of them are able to use these phones? How many of them can to charge these phones? And then most of our beneficiaries, like especially in Kenya, we have the 70 plus who are getting cash transfer program. And some of them are the ones who are really needy. Even people with disability were very needy during this particular time. And some of them have not gone to school. Some are so elderly that even the use of technology becomes very difficult. So it needs the beneficiaries to be trained. And looking at some of the elderly ones who have not gone to school, sometimes even taking them through the use of smartphones can be very difficult because it's very, even a simple are not able to use this technology. So it becomes very difficult. But again, we can also look at ways of creating groups or beneficiary associations where they can support each other. That can be a very good opportunities. How then do they sit together and be able to educate each other and help each other in terms of using of this technology. But again, we know there's some danger that when you sit together and the loss of some of the benefits, we have had people losing some money they're given because of this sitting together and trusting another person to show you how to use this technology. So again, we can try investing on the phones, but again, we know there are some challenges that also come with the use of phones and all these particular and the tablets in terms of the delivery. So as much as we want to put them together, we know it needs a lot of training for us to be able to let the beneficiaries access this. Again, in terms of what are some opportunities that we can have, there's been difficulties in being able to work with this. Like in Kenya, we work with Safaricom, and making Safaricom be able to penetrate all areas of Kenya sometimes very difficult. And sometimes it needs you to partner with them to just do it as on service to the community by making sure that they are able to reach those particular areas. And in Kenya, during the COVID situation, we delivered some of the cash through the Safaricom. Safaricom is one of the mobile service providers that we use to deliver cash to some of the people in very remote areas. So partnering sometimes becomes very, very, very critical in this. The issue of electricity, internet access, this is really, really, really a big challenge in most of the African countries. If you look at even, I can say, for example, in Kenya, where we are, some of the areas you're not able to reach these people. And therefore, even with economic inclusion, as much as you want to deliver the various packages that you want to deliver, it becomes very, very, very difficult to do it on your own, government as a whole, because the cost of when starting up the structures and the systems that are required for delivery of cash through technology sometimes becomes very expensive. But again, we are saying that there's opportunity of uniting and being able to work with partners to deliver these benefits to the beneficiaries. Partnership is very critical in terms of economic inclusion. It becomes very critical, and it's really important that we partner, look for partners to be able to work with them to deliver this. I'm very happy we are working. I know we are already working with one of the partners, and I heard it yesterday that they are delivering even coaching, issues of training, and that is Village Enterprise Fund and BOM and the rest. They are delivering training through technology, which I think can be very important in terms of enhancing the delivery of economic inclusion program. So technology, I want to say that is very critical and very important, but in Africa, we still have a lot of challenges that are still making use of technology a bit difficult for us. But I want to say that it's something that all governments are now, after the COVID, everybody's looking towards having well-organized systems that will enable us identify and even deliver the benefits to the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winnie, for presenting the experience of representing the Africa Community of Practice and presenting the experience of several African countries, and then also giving a bit more information on Kenya. And now we'll go to Carolina for her presentation. So Carolina, over to you, please.
Yeah, sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. So, so Fundación Capital is a nonprofit social enterprise, and we work basically to promote economic citizenship at scale and globally. And through our economic inclusion programs, we have reached more than 200,000 people across different countries. Our graduation programs are mainly in Latin America, which has been one of the regions that was most affected by COVID. So when we realized that the crisis was here to stay, we had major questions or concerns that I'm going to share with you. So what were these big concerns? First of all, how to reach program participants in the face of quarantine measures. Some of our countries had lockdowns, and for a couple of weeks and months, we could not reach program participants face to face. Also, how to keep providing meaningful content related to the graduation curricula to program participants. How to address new topics related to pandemic, like COVID-19 prevention measures or information about emergency transfers, and how to reinforce our gender transformative approach, particularly in the face of increased levels of gender-based violence. So Fundación Capital works hand in hand with governments in the region, and we support them to implement economic inclusion programs. So both our staff and the government staff were unable to reach out to program participants. So I tried to change a little bit the order of my presentation and start with some insights based on these big questions. And then following that, I'm going to share some examples of how we did it. So the first thing was that we did was trying to leverage Fundación Capital's existing digital solutions, what we already had in our hands. So Fundación Capital has been investing in digital solutions for a couple of years now, and we knew we had to take advantage of that, but also we speed up the development and delivery of solutions that were in our pipeline. The second aspect was trying to use digital platforms that are already popular with program participants, that are already used by them. And in this case, particularly in Latin America, WhatsApp is extremely popular. And what we see is that more and more, even families under the poverty line, they have access to cell phones, a lot of them smartphones, at least one family member. So we took advantage of that to have a strategy based on WhatsApp, but also Facebook and YouTube that are already popular as well. We also try to use multi-channel and multi-format strategy. And by multi-channel, I mean trying to reach participants through different channels, because one particular channel may not reach this family, but other channels can. So trying to be multi-channel increases the chances of reaching out to families. And being multi-format means that you accommodate for different literacy levels as well. And finally, we try to conduct assessments while implementing to adjust content and delivery. It was not easy. So COVID presented us a situation where we didn't have much time to plan assessments and evaluations, and we had to evaluate while we were implementing all together. So just to exemplify a little bit of the digital solutions that we are using, particularly I'm using the case of Paraguay. The first tool The first two tools that I'm going to explain are tablet-based apps that we developed basically to digitize the graduation curricula. The first one is Aptitude, which is a tablet-based app, works online and offline, and it has a monitoring tool in its backend. So it helps us understand the implementation in the field. How does it work? Our coaches, they go to families with a tablet with Aptitude in it, and they support the family while they are training and going through the app's modules. The coaches can then focus on providing a personalized support to the families because they are not worried about having to convey all the graduation curricula. So it facilitates the work for the coach as well. And during the pandemic, we also start to explore some a different methodology, tablet self-rotation, right? So instead of the coach being there and visiting each family with the tablet, the coach would hand over the tablet to one family, and then this family would rotate the tablet to other family in their communities that were also part of the program. In this way, we try to minimize the contact between the coach and program participants, and the monitoring was done to WhatsApp contacts and phone calls as well. The second tool, it's quite similar to Aptitude. The main difference is in its content. So this is an example of a tool that we had to speed up development, which is called Igualdade. So it covers basically gender aspects. We saw in the pandemic that the gender-based levels, gender-based violence was increasing. And so this tool covers prevention of gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health, women's participation in leadership, shared and nonviolent parent, for example. So we speed up the delivery of this tool to be able to come to the families with this content that we found it was very, very necessary during the pandemic. The third strategy, I think it was the biggest change during the pandemic. So we developed a massive communication and awareness campaign through WhatsApp, particularly with the government of Paraguay, in which we designed a strategy to reach all the participants from the National Conditional Cash Transfer, Tecoporá. And the objective was to provide timely and frequent information to program participants, especially maintain the link with program participants because we didn't want them to feel abandoned during the lockdown period, and serve as a trustful virtual assistant to also fight all the misinformation that was going on, right? We were very mindful to care for the diversity of participant profiles, and then it's linking back to the start. It's all about being multi-format. So we knew that only text messages wouldn't work because families have low literacy levels. So we tried to mix text messages, but also short videos, audio bites, and flyers and images. We created a storytelling behind the messages. We draw some characters. So the idea was to make the whole strategy attractive to participants. And also this kind of channel allows for scale. So we were working with more than 100,000 families. And the evolution of Connector, the evolution of the WhatsApp strategy is a tool called Connector that we are developing as well. So Connector is a chatbot that works through WhatsApp. It is a virtual assistant for our program participants. The idea of Connector is that since it uses principles of artificial intelligence, it can learn with interactions with program participants, learn about their profiles, and be able to provide more tailored information and connect them to opportunities in their communities. So this is a tool that we think is quite the future of complementing our training and coaching strategy. Talking about evaluation, so we try to evaluate these new strategies during their implementation, and the results so far are quite good. So specifically for the WhatsApp strategy, more than almost 90% of both program participants and program staff consider the strategies to be very necessary, and they support their work in the field. A more different innovative approach that we had for evaluation was to try to understand the effects on gender attitudes for participants that received gender messages and participants that did not. And in this case, we worked with a researcher, Derek Collins, and her team used an innovative way of analyzing the effects, which was using natural language processing and also the analysis of voice signals to understand the perception of program participants. So what we did was record simple questions to participants that received the messages and participants that did not receive the messages. And then they could answer also through audio bites in WhatsApp, so they didn't have to type it down. And for them, it was more comfortable to do so. And then Darius' team analyzed the answers, both understanding what they said, but also the sentiments behind what they were saying using voice signals analysis. And the results were also quite positive. We saw that women that received the messages had more progressive views about gender. And it's a preliminary result, but we conduct this research in Paraguay, and now we're going to do the same in Colombia. So just to wrap up, I think the big question is it worth it to use digital tools in program implementation? On one side, definitely there are higher upfront costs to invest in digital solutions. And there is a need to bring a new set of expertise to the team. A set of expertise that it's not always present in NGOs, for example. And there is definitely a learning curve within the organization, right? It is a process of incorporating digital tools. But on the other hand, what I can say is that in our case, digital tools have allowed us to scale more rapidly, especially during the pandemic with all the constraints that we had. And if you use correctly, digital tools can decrease operation costs as well. Definitely costs are diluted with the scale. So I would advise when you're thinking about designing a strategy, design for scale, right? Thinking about the scaling. Also, digital tools help to standardize the quality of training. So we are less dependent on the capacity of coaches to provide quality training and coaching. It is also attractive to participants, and I think this is an important point. We see that participants are quite engaged in the digital tools. It is attractive, it is interactive, and particularly youth and children are quite fond of accompanying their parents during their training. And I think finally, but very importantly, digital tools are effective to deliver positive outcomes. So we have conducted many evaluations in our graduation programs, and the results are comparable to other graduation programs that do not use digital tools for training and coaching, and in some cases are even better. So there is not exactly a trade-off between using technologies and losing the quality of program delivery. In fact, I think they are quite complementary. So in our side, Fundación Capital, we believe in high tech and high touch, using technology, but never forgetting the importance of human touch and the importance of the bonds between coaches and families as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for sharing the experience of Fundación Capital in Paraguay. Now we'll go to our last presentation. So with Avnish and Doug. Pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ines. Can you hear me and see the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So we just to begin, Doug and I are from an organization called Instiglio, a nonprofit that works with governments globally to improve the cost effectiveness and inclusivity of service delivery systems. So we're really focused on the nuts and bolts of how to get implementation to be more results oriented and more cost effective. So, just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, today we'll speak about what we call the COVID Adaptation Fund that we had launched with some partners last year. And we'll zoom into some of these digital innovations that came through the fund and what kind of innovations we're seeing in Kenya and Rwanda, where the fund was focused. So just to give you a bit of a rationale, very similar to what Carolina just mentioned in her presentation, this COVID Adaptation Fund was really motivated by an observation when working with our government partners that they were facing a series of service delivery disruptions, right? Because of mobility restrictions, because of the social distancing norms that they were needed to respect. And the same was true for NGO partners. So we were in a situation where service delivery was being disrupted, and the people who were most at risk of not receiving critical services were the most vulnerable, the most disconnected ones. And so the COVID Adaptation Fund sort of basically was a response to that, was an effort to provide rapid and flexible funding to a series of NGO partners to go out and innovate on how they can reimagine service delivery in this context. And we ended up sort of raising $800,000 and distributing it to 9 sort of NGO partners in Kenya and Rwanda to trial different types of innovations in service delivery that could, overcome the challenges of COVID. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this fund was meant to be rapid and to provide government partners with rapid answers. So it ran from October 2020 to April 2021. We're just finishing the end line and trying to capture the lessons and learnings from that right now. We received about 150 proposals from different organizations in Kenya and Rwanda. So it's really kind of a wide range of ideas. And we really selected organizations that first had the capabilities to actually deliver the innovations they were proposing. But we also looked for ideas that were relevant beyond that organization, that had relevance for the broader ecosystem of economic inclusion, for the government partners and their innovation needs, and that could somehow inform policy integration efforts afterwards. And the grantees are shown on the slide. We had grantees in Rwanda and Kenya. You might know many of them. So One Acre Fund in Rwanda, TIA Fund, Women for Women International, African Entrepreneur Collective, Precision Agriculture for Development, BOMA Project, Senecal, Green Agri-Ventures, and Village Enterprise were our partners in this effort. So on the next slide, my colleague Doug will start diving into some of these digital innovations that came for the fund and give you a sense of what those were.
Thanks, great. Yeah, now that we have a broad landscape of what the Adaptation Fund is, I want to give you some more concrete information on specifically what were the digital innovations and solutions piloted by the 9 organizations. And it's really exciting to hear from our colleagues, Carolina and Winnie, people who are working in the space with cash transfers and these online platforms for trainings. So these organizations did some similar work. And broadly as an introduction, they fall into these 4 major buckets on the screen. So there's short message services, SMS and unstructured supplementary service data, USSD. That's just very generally mobile phone texting applications to share information. Interactive voice response, IVR, is similar, but rather than written text, you're using voice activated responses. So I think a lot of us are familiar with this. If you've ever called your insurance provider, for example, you're met with a menu of options and you give verbal responses to walk through the menu and get to the customer representative or get the information that you need via the phone platform. Mobile banking and savings and loans apps, these are what they sound like, very simply digital mobile platforms on mobile phones where, for example, savings and loan groups can monitor, manage, and share money mobily through those platforms. And then as a 4th kind of catch-all bucket, a couple organizations tried some things outside of these 3 major buckets. For example, Village Enterprise is a poverty graduation organization working with poor and rural people in Kenya. And they did like a video training where they could provide the trainings via video to hard to reach populations without being in person. So to dive into this even a little bit more, to give you a sharper picture of what the organizations were and what their digital solutions were, I want to just spotlight the SMS and USSD platform. So for example, 2 organizations, One Acre Fund and Precision Agriculture for Development, are both organizations who work with farmers throughout Kenya. And 1 Acre Fund, for example, before this USSD platform and need to adjust to the COVID situation, would typically do farmer enrollments in person, having to travel and meet face-to-face with farmers, get their information, enroll them, and share information on farming products and inputs in person. So now they're able to pilot through this adaptation fund and launch a USSD platform where this information and enrollment of farmers could all be done digitally through mobile phones. So through this experiment, 1 Acre Fund, even in this rapid experimentation of just 6 or 7 months, has reached an additional 148,000 farmers through that digital solution. And Precision Agriculture for Development similarly had to do a lot of training and farmer engagement in person, but through using an SMS and USSD platform is able to reach 100,000 farmers to share information on farming inputs, and importantly, things like real-time alerts on disruptions to supply chain, value chain disruptions that are affecting farmers and their ability to maybe to reach markets and sell their goods. So it's a really exciting real-time development for them. And to focus on the interactive voice response, IVR, again, just to give you a flavor of some concrete innovations and organizations and what they were doing, African Entrepreneur Collective and BOMA Project are both organizations working in Kenya. The former works with refugee populations specifically in Kenya. And again, they relied heavily on in-person trainings with these organizations to help them build resilience for their new businesses that they're starting up in refugee communities. And now with the social distance measures, they were able to try this IVR, piloting this innovation to reach their beneficiaries virtually and provide context-specific training to help build their businesses. And BOMA Project, similarly, they're working with poor and rural women throughout Kenya, doing a poverty graduation model. And instead of having to do these trainings in person, they were able to replace some of that with this IVR delivery technique. So what are some of the key takeaways and benefits that we're seeing so far? I think it's important to spotlight. There are many, but in these 3 major buckets, just want to highlight these quickly. First and foremost, the cost effectiveness and cost savings that organizations are seeing from doing these innovations. Right, it's quite simple that instead of having to travel and invest resources in in-person training and reaching hard to reach last mile communities, organizations are able to more cost effectively provide these trainings through these digital platforms. And secondly, they're able to provide these services more easily and at a greater scale and reach. So, from the cost savings of doing this stuff virtually, they're able to reinvest those cost savings into actually expanding their services and reaching more communities that they might not have otherwise reached. And also by the nature of virtual and digital engagement, right, they're able to reach last mile communities through these mobile platforms as opposed to having to travel long distances. As our colleague Winnie mentioned, in Africa and especially Kenya, right, there are a lot of just very remote villages that people it takes a lot of time, energy, and resources to engage those communities. And the last point mentioned just, which I think is often overlooked, but I think really exciting for the organizations themselves, they now have much more data at their fingertips to do some real-time adjustment and learning to make decisions for their organizations. For instance, and Carolina mentioned this with their platforms, they have a back-end data behind what their platforms are providing. So now organizations who, for instance, have these mobile loan platforms, they have more data and information of what are the loans that are needed, what are the characteristics of those who are needing the loans, what are the amounts of the loans, or through the IVR, if you're accessing these trainings, they have data on what are the trainings that are being utilized most, whereas the deficit of where trainings maybe are needed more. So this real-time data collection allows them to build their services even bigger and better beyond. So I'll pass it back to Avnish, who will kind of explain a little bit more of scaling this through government programs and beyond.
Thank you, Doug. So as we mentioned at the beginning, the entire intention of this adaptation fund is to really sort of support government partners in innovating on their own service delivery systems, right? So what we're learning through these different innovations is that they can really tackle a couple of different challenges our government partners face, not just in COVID times, but in general in service delivery. The first one is, obviously they could potentially reduce the need for significant in-person interactions, which often happens, especially when you're dealing with remote communities that can be very costly and time consuming. So technology can get there much faster if it's done well. So there's an element of cost effectiveness there over time at scale, as I think Caroline mentioned earlier. That's really important to think of the scale from the get-go, right? And then the second one is sort of that inclusion angle, and there's a sort of like a caveat to that, because obviously, technology can get you to that last mile population even when you're resource constrained, but it can also impose barriers to access if you're not dealing with the digital literacy aspects as well. So we got to balance those two things and think of inclusion in a bit of a broader sense. And then the final piece is, oftentimes when systems of service delivery are overly dependent on heavy HR costs, and it's difficult to replicate, right? Because you have a lot of turnover issues, you have a lot of challenges in training your own staff, and so on and so forth. So we can potentially overcome those replication and scale up complexities when it's people-centered. And we're already looking at opportunities to integrate those kind of solutions in some of those existing economic inclusion programs in Kenya and Rwanda, and we'll be eager to kind of share a little bit the success of these efforts as we go forward. Next slide. And coming a little bit to some of these caveats, right? I think we've observed that just like our NGO partners needed, innovating on technology requires bandwidth and resources that often is not available because we are very busy in the day-to-day delivery, so we don't have the time to stake out this kind of space to innovate and to integrate technology, which is not as easy of a process as it may sound. So organizations must be able to commit that upfront investment of time and resources and have an internal capacity to adopt this kind of tools. It's not as straightforward. The second piece is, once you roll the technology, it's not over. There's a long discovery process, an adaptation and contextualization process to make sure that it's responding to the diversity of user realities out there. So your ability to kind of problem solve and give the space for that technology to really sit in and serve the needs of different people and be adapted to those needs, I think is important, and will probably take another year or two before you get to a place where you're really connecting to your users. And finally, to sort of reiterate this point, one of the biggest challenges, which I think Winnie also mentioned earlier, is the limited access to digital technologies, and digital literacy are really key barriers. So I think, one insight is, that
Avnish?
Yes, wrapping
up. Thank you.
One insight is just, to make sure that when we think of digital technology at scale, it's probably best to think of a big push, where there's a lot of investment at the same time on the user side and the technology and infrastructure side, rather than slowly rolling it out to, overcome some of these inclusion issues that we're talking about, but also make sure that the economies of scale kick in really quickly for the government partners. So with that, I'll wrap it up. If you're interested to kind of learn more, you can feel free to reach out, and we're going to be releasing some of the reports of the learnings later in June. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Avnish and Doug, for presenting the Instiglio experience. Now we'll move into our Q&A session. We have a few minutes for discussion. So I'll start with the questions. So I'll make a few questions to our speakers, and then we'll open up for questions from participants. We've already seen several questions on the chat box, and please continue to post them there if you do have more. So our first question is for Carolina. And Carolina, you presented the use of technology tools such as specific apps that were developed and also WhatsApp to implement programs in Paraguay. Do you think these technologies, are these technologies being implemented in other countries other than Paraguay? And do you think they are suitable for low-income countries where technology penetration is still in the nascent stages?
Yeah, definitely, Ines. So when we design a tool, we think about scaling. So our apps and other digital tools that we have are implemented in other countries. So for example, Aptitude has been adapted to Mexico, to Honduras, to Colombia as well, the same with Igualdad. And I think it's important to have this flexibility to have these adaptations, right? In terms of low income countries, definitely. I think we saw examples here, right? In Africa, the opportunity for use technology in other countries. For example, our apps work online and offline, because here in Latin America as well, we work in remote areas without connection. So this allows us to reach remote areas as well.
Great, thank you so much, Carolina. Now I have a question for Avnish and Doug. You discussed innovative and nimble digital solutions that are being tested in both Rwanda and Kenya. Can you talk a bit about the potential of these innovations to be delivered at scale? And do you think there is an appetite on the government side to adopt these innovations?
Yeah, happy to take that. So you know, as I mentioned earlier, there at the outset, there's always an interest to adopt these kind of solutions, and I think technically speaking, our government partners really see the opportunities in some of the social protection sort of initiatives that they have. Right, the real challenge, I think, comes down to resources and the ability to prioritize this in a time when, you know, service delivery is equally urgent, right? So you always feel you have that trade-off to make between, you know, dedicating your next, you know, shilling or your next amount of money that you have to reaching and delivering a service versus taking a step back and investing in your service delivery sort of technology systems, right? So I think, you know, the interest is there, but I think we're still far from having the resources, the capabilities, and the prioritization of these kind of solutions to see it grow up at scale. And as I mentioned before, there's also legitimate concerns around the need to, in parallel, do that digital literacy, digital education sort of process that takes time and takes efforts and resources. So I think it comes down to like really prioritization and resource constraint when it comes to adoption at scale, but the interest and the opportunity is definitely there.
And I would just add, with engagement with these 9 service providers, they've already expressed and showed that they've built really long-lasting partnerships in launching these innovations. So, for example, with the mobile platforms or the app developers that have helped them develop these trainings and digital solutions, those are long-lasting partnerships that they're carrying forward. And then beyond that, has even opened the door to additional funding opportunities and proposals that those partnerships are now leveraging with other organizations like MasterCard Foundation, so that this has been a launching pad for them to even further extend their innovation for future work, which is really exciting for us to see.
Great, thank you so much, Avnish and Doug. Thank you. And okay, I have one more question for both Avnish and Carolina. How can we take these digital solutions to scale through public programs?
I think, yeah, we're already doing this here in Latin America. I think it's also a process of adapting to programs, to public programs, right? The massive WhatsApp campaign that we implemented was in partnership with the Paraguayan government. Our graduation programs here are also done in partnership with government. So the use of the apps that I showed is embedded within graduation programs that are led by governments. And I think, as Avnish said, it's a process that the governments are more and more realizing the importance of having good data about their program participants and being able to reach them during crisis, and not only the COVID crisis, but I think we all in our countries we see the results and consequences of climate change, and it's going to be more and more often that field work is disrupted by natural disasters, for example. So governments are also, I would say, recognizing the importance of having multiple channels to reach program participants and also learn about them through quality data.
Yeah,
Great, thank you, Carolina. Go ahead.
think that covers most of my points as well. But like just to add to it, I think, like many innovations in our space, we're often looking for windows of opportunities to be able to like scale them within governments, right? So when there is such a window of opportunities, I think the ability of funders to really support those efforts in a very fast and sort of like scaled up manner is really important. So, it involves, like, I think, a collaborative approach with different funders interested in this space to identifying where windows of opportunities exist with governments, perhaps like in the case of Paraguay or Colombia, and being able to focus on that, because I think we are at times very dispersed and financing things in very different countries where sometimes the political space for adopting these innovations, it just does not exist, and that doesn't really go anywhere, right? Whereas if we could really identify where that space exists and focus and dedicate more resources to those opportunities, I think we might see more examples of scale-ups like the one we're seeing here in Latin America.
Thank you so much, Avnish. And now we have a question for Winnie to hear more on the government perspective. So Winnie, you raised very important challenges that governments face on the technology front, but also the opportunities technology presents. So we want to know what your thoughts are about the solutions that have been presented today, both in terms of feasibility and scalability. And then if you have any advice you want to provide to technical partners to initiate a dialogue with the government on these topics.
Thank you, Ines. I believe digitalization is very critical and it is feasible. And any of the countries are able to practice. I know it's quite expensive in the initial part in terms of setting up systems and structures. And that's where the partnership really comes. And that's why we need a big dialogue, because all the governments are, African governments are all trying to make sure that they are able to use technology to identify, to pay, to deliver all the services that are supposed to be delivered. And I know it's a bit difficult because of the cost that goes with it, and looking at the skill set that people have. For us to be able to use coaching, I know it's already being used. I'm very happy that it's being used in Kenya by some of the organizations, and some of them I'm happy that we are working with them in our economic inclusion program. So I think it might be very easy for us in terms of moving forward. And I think we are all interested to see how we can even do it, training and cut on costs of delivering of the programs. So I think there need to be a dialogue, and I think for us we'll start that dialogue in terms of seeing how do we get partnership to support the initial investments that go into digitalization of delivery of services. That's what I think I'll say. But I think we're already using it, like for Kenya, like for cash transfer, we are using it, and even for some of the trainings but the problem is the cost of developing the tools for training. That again will require a bit of money to be able to put, but I think the investment is worth it, and I think all governments are interested in putting that investment, even if it's using the government funds plus additional funding from partners, and even support in terms of technical support. That will help us be able to move and digitalize and even scale up economic inclusion across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winnie. And so I want to thank all our panelists. This has been a really interesting session. So thank you very much, Winnie, Avnish, Doug, and Carolina for showing these different experiences. And now we'll ask you to please rate the session. So you will now see a short survey appear on your screen. So it will just take you a moment. And please let us know if you enjoyed the session, and so please rate it. And this is an anonymous poll, and the results will not be displayed. Thank you very much.